with On Hot or On Fire. This is my channel, Culty Clutch, where we talk about things that interest me, up into and including culty activities. For Veterans Day weekend, I've been taking a slightly different tack and reading from my grandfather's war records from World War II. He was a POW for the Japanese for most of the war. Part one was reading his debriefing notes to the military. Part two was his handwritten story that he submitted to Reader's Digest but was not chosen. And this one, part three, is after the war. I've got started with his the Bronze Star Medal because I can't find the hospital records. I really thought there were hospital records in here that detailed his state of health when he left the concentration camps, but I cannot find it. From my memory, he was under 100 pounds, like around 95. He had pellagra, scurvy, and I can't remember the other nutritional illnesses. But he had most of the nutritional deficiency illnesses. He spent 6 months in the hospital recovering and found out sometime into the recovery that his brother was in the same hospital but on a different floor, and that's when they've discovered each other had survived the war. They'd both been captured in the Pacific Theater within weeks of each other and were kept in different camps. And a nurse had noticed that there were two Merediths, one on one floor and one on another, and had asked him if he knew this man, and that's how they were reunited. And one of the awards he got, aside from the obvious Purple Heart, was a Good Conduct Medal. He got, of course, the War Victory Medal for World War II. There's probably bars or ribbons for the Pacific Theater. All of those are in his discharge papers. This is detailing the Bronze Star Medal. So there was a military operation against the enemy in Balanga, Luzon, Philippine Islands on 29 and 30 January 1942 with a citation for each as shown herein below. And my grandfather is the fifth one down. Serving with the 27th Material Squadron during the bitter struggle to save Bataan, he volunteered, with disregard for his personal safety, to participate in an intelligence patrol to procure important information concerning enemy activities in the town of Balanga at a time when it was known that Japanese patrols were active in the area. The group encountered a Filipino patrol which had suffered 5 casualties during a skirmish with the Japanese on a bridge leading into the town. The Filipino report that the bridge was defended by the Japanese was confirmed with the aid of field glasses, an enemy machine gun emplacement, and 2 Japanese were seen at the far base of the span. Excuse me, this is photographed from manual typewriters. Sometimes it's hard to read. Members of the patrol realized additional information would be of great value, so they waded the river, went into the town, and interrogated frightened civilians, thereby procuring valuable information on enemy dispositions. Those poor Filipino civilians, Jesus. Through his outstanding courage, resourcefulness, and unremitting devotion to duty, he made a noteworthy contribution to the historic defense of Bataan. R.K. Sutherland, Lieutenant General, United States Army Chief of Staff. Also, B.H. Fitch, Brigadier General, U.S. Army Adjutant General. So that was the recon mission where he got his Bronze Star. I thought that was interesting. the details of wading through the river. And here's where someone gave him a reference letter. Dear Sergeant Meredith, General, sorry, I wish I could show this to you better. This is probably better. General Arnold has asked me to send you the following message. It was with a great deal of personal pleasure that I learned of your return to the Air Forces. We're proud of what you did and thankful for your safe return. Welcome back, Arnold. As for myself, I cannot praise too highly the courage and fortitude which you have displayed in the face of extraordinary hardships throughout the time you were a prisoner of war. Your faith and loyalty have been a real contribution to victory. I want to congratulate you on the way you have upheld the dignity and prestige of our country under the most trying conditions, and to join General Arnold in welcoming you back. Sincerely, George C. Kenney, General, United States Army Commanding. To Sergeant Meredith, Strong, Texas. There is the newspaper report, a copy of the newspaper report where both Meredith brothers were reported missing in action and prisoners of war. Then there's a note here from the White House. To members of United States Armed Forces being repatriated in October 1945, it gives me special pleasure to welcome you back to your native shores and to express on behalf of the people of the United States the joy we feel at your deliverance from the hands of the enemy. It is a source of profound satisfaction that our efforts to accomplish your return have been successful. You have fought valiantly in foreign lands and have suffered greatly. As your Commander-in-Chief, I take pride in your past achievements and express the thanks of a grateful nation for your services in combat and your steadfastness while a prisoner of war. May God grant each of you happiness and an early return to health. Harry Truman. And that's a letter from the White House. There's also a Reveille newsletter that I'm not going to bother reading. It's full of very outdated references that are now considered racist. So I'm just not even going to try to decode that one. Then a lot of the rest of this is about his back pay giving promotions and back pay from the 4 years that he was in prisoner of war. He's got 2 sets of honorable discharges because after he left, after World War II, he re-enlisted in 54, and after he left, he got another set of discharge papers. So I can get confused with the discharge papers here. Yes, that is the first set of discharge papers. And this is the second set of discharge papers. Here is the Enlisted Record and Report of Separation, Honorable Discharge. American Defense Service Medal with 1 Bronze Star, Asiatic Pacific Campaign Medal with 2 Bronze Stars, Philippine Defense Service Medal with 1 Bronze Star, Good Conduct Medal, Purple Heart, GO4 29th Rep Dep 30 September 45 Victory Medal, 7 Overseas Service Bars. That will make perfect sense to someone who served in the Army. I have a general gist of it. Those are his immunizations. Sorry. I got a little flustered when I saw cholera and then realized, okay, that's an immunization. That's good. Honorably discharged to re-enlist in the Army Discharged as temporary staff sergeant, permanent grade corporal regular Army, Bronze Star Medal, General Hospital Distinguished Unit Badge with 2 oak leaf clusters, service stripes. So that would be the salad bar that would go with all of his service stuff on his dress uniform. And this is the fancy schmancy discharge. So when my mother was 4, they went, he had re-enlisted, and they went to the Philippines. It was the Air Force. Before, he was serving in the Army Air Corps, which later became the Air Force. And as a Air Force brat, she spent a year in the Philippines, then a couple years back in the States. She spent a year in Turkey, a couple years, then back in the States, and bounced around in a few places from the States. So she saw the world before she graduated high school. So there was a reason why she was rebelling against a really restrictive, culture of the time. It's because she'd literally traveled the world, and she knew that a lot of the stuff they were worrying about wasn't a big deal. But, that's hippies for you. This is a picture of my grandfather before his death. There's absolutely no information in here with any of any of these other people, who the general is here, who these ladies are, but this is my grandfather, Meredith, right here. He had red hair. That is where my mother got the red hair from. He passed away shortly after he moved back to Strawn, Texas. It was an accidental drowning. It's generally assumed that he went fishing and had tied one too many on and probably fell in and drowned. But it was an accidental drowning where he fell in while he was fishing. And the general consensus of the family is, being a POW killed him. It just took a long time because he was a functional alcoholic, and not always functional alcoholic after the war. The only thing he mentioned to my mother growing up was they would catch grasshoppers to eat with their rice in the camps. That was the only thing she ever remembered him sharing with her. So one day when we were all there visiting Grandma, she mentioned this, that she wished she had some of the records or something from that time because she didn't know what had happened during his POW experience. She was afraid that he'd been on the Bataan Death March, I believe is what it's called. It was a forced march that was brutal, and a lot of soldiers died. But he escaped capture from Bataan, but was later captured in Corregidor. So we found that out when Grandma said, well, there's that folder of his military records up in that closet. Why don't you check there? And all this information was in it. All of his military records, his discharge, his handwritten letter, which no one knew existed, which fabulously tells a tale of him escaping capture on Bataan and swimming to another island on a log and meeting up with American troops later, which is bonkers that this is only one sentence in his story. And I wanted to finish it up tonight with the story as much as we have in here of him after he came home. The things that he would have seen and heard and had to do to survive in a POW camp are very likely why he drunk himself to death. And I have a lot of compassion for him. He passed away before I was born, so I only have stories and pictures of him. But I do have his red hair and freckles. Thank you for joining me for the third and final part of A Long Trip. Staff Sergeant A.C. Meredith, POW. Good night.